This is Express Leads. Greetings, everyone. It's Friday, and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Express Leads. I'm your host, Paul Brady, and today we're going to talk about 9 ways to create an effective email campaign. And email, I talk to clients and folks that I know that are peers and business connections, colleagues, all about email and how important email is in building that list. So let's jump right in. So if you're creating an email campaign, one of the things that, and I've asked this question, it's kind of shocking that people don't know the answer to this right off the bat, but I'll say, when you send out an email campaign or even an email, what's the most important thing initially? And some people say, I don't know, they have a few guesses. It's the subject line. I don't understand how people get stumped on that, but the subject line is so important because whether they're on their iPhone or Android or, in their email client, the first thing they see is the subject. And so if you're trying to engage someone immediately, and that's what effective email campaigns are all about. You want to engage someone, get them interested, but they have to click your email to open it. And the open rates go up when your subject line, the content you have in your subject line is engaging. So I'll give you an example. And I've talked about this in, I think, a previous podcast, but I did an email campaign for an economics nonprofit, and I used the subject line that said, here's the time I bombed an interview and what I learned. And the open rates were astronomical. They've gone down over time. I've been running that campaign for a while, but in the beginning, they were close to 60%. And open rates can be really low. Industry average is much, much lower than that. And so getting close to 60% was phenomenal. And, and that's what it's about. It's a lot of it's about finding what engages with your client. And subject line is the first thing they hit and see. So if they want to open that email, you have to have a good subject line. And it has to be engaging. So, but, along those lines, since we're talking about reaching out and grabbing someone's attention, the second thing that's really important in creating an effective email campaign is connecting with your audience. And I know that sounds kind of vague, but I'll drill down a little bit here. A lot of times, you get, and we've all seen it, right? You get these emails from people that are pretty much, you open it up and it's like, oh, here's my product, it's great, and here's why it's wonderful, and you should use it, and here's my long sales letter, and maybe that's all the copywriting, that's all great, and maybe it's actually really well written, but your effectiveness goes down because people don't know anything about you unless you're Bill Gates or Tony Robbins or Russell Brunson or someone like that. People don't know you. So when you have an email campaign, and the first thing you do is just throw a product out there, you're going to get some hits, but it's not going to be as successful as it could be. And so, and that's why I want to talk a little bit about something that I know Russell Brunson talks about it quite a bit. And I forget the individual he learned this from. I wish I knew his name because it's brilliant. But Russell talks about something called the soap opera email sequence. And what the soap opera email sequence is, it's all about trying to get someone to know you, a little bit. So you don't want people to you just don't want to throw something in someone's face and say, buy my products or use my services. And I guess the best way to look at that is if you're at a networking event, let's say you're at a Chamber of Commerce event or you're at a party, and you're talking to people, you're going to walk up and people are going to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, how are you? And you're going to say, oh, I'm so-and-so, what do you do for business? Oh, I do this, or, at a networking event. And, you get to know them a little bit. You talk a little bit about them, you don't walk up to someone at a networking event and say, hey, buy my product. People just, it's rude. It's in their face. It's like, not at all something that would be attractive in person. So when you look at an email sequence, it's really not a whole lot different. you can't just go to someone and say, buy my stuff. You have to get to know them. And that's where the soap opera email sequence comes from. And let me dive in just a little bit to that sequence. So it's usually based on a 5-day email sequence. So each day you send out an email, and it's meant as something where when someone first opts into your list, everyone sees this. This is the first thing they see, right? So it's broken down into 5 emails, and I'll walk through the definitions that Russell and the person he learned it from used. So there's the first email, which is really considered an introduction email. And that's, like I said, that's where you introduce yourself. Maybe you set up some of your the expectations for your target list. And by telling them what's coming up, introducing yourself, talking about stuff, but at the same time, you want to keep them curious and spark their interest so they're, more apt to want to hear more, and open your next email. Because you'll know right away if your first email doesn't work. And this is also part of an effective email campaign that you want to pay attention to is analytics, right? You want to look at the open rates. So if the open rates are, pretty good, say 30-40% on your first email, and they drop precipitously on the second email, and they're down to like 3%, well, your first email isn't working because people read it, they opened it, right? But then their reaction was, meh, not interested. And so by the time the second email comes around, there's less and less people. And as the list goes on, there's usually a decline when you get from email 1 to the last email, right? Because over time, people are like reading it and they're like, okay, I gotcha. And maybe they even made a decision and they just don't even read the other emails, right? So that's something you want to keep in mind, is kind of looking at that stuff and figuring out, whether your emails are working. So, so email 1 is introduction email. Email 2 of the soap opera sequence would be telling your story. So the first one's just introducing yourself, adding some curiosity, where you might say, hey, tune in, watch for my next email where I tell you how I bombed this interview, just as an example of what I used, right? So in the second email, maybe you tell your story about, who you are and how you got to where you are now. But oftentimes you want to tell something, this is just their example. It can be anything you want. But, the kind of what they talk about is, doing something dramatic. Like, for instance, something that's like the lowest point of your life. Explain, how you got there, what you did wrong, and at the same time, you're setting things up for the next email. And by the way, you're always setting things up for the next email because you want to try and engage people. And again, as I said earlier, from the first email, you're setting up expectations. What's next? So this guy bombed his interview, and so what happened next? So that's the second one. You're kind of telling your story, and you're talking about a low point or a dramatic point in your life, and setting things up for the third. Now, the third email is what they call the epiphany, and that's where you tell people on your list, how you figured things out, and how did you get out of that situation? How did you get out of that low point in your life? How did you explain or fix that? So you explain your epiphany, what suddenly dawned on you, how you got there, what inspired you, and then how it happened. And at the same time, again, you guessed it, you're setting things up for email 4. And then email 4 is results. That's where you're talking about your success that came from the epiphany. And, you can actually kind of end things there if you wanted to, or you could actually go onto a 5th email where you're kind of setting the stage, is what they call the 5th one, where, you sell a product. And that's where you set the stage for that. And just as a bonus tip, if you want to get people to respond or be engaged, ask them questions or ask for a response to get, into their inbox. People may look at that and say, oh, okay, I like this. Maybe I'll respond to this. It's a similar thing you see on Twitter and some social media. People talk a lot about, asking questions in Facebook groups and asking questions or doing polls on Twitter. People are funny about stuff like that. I do a coffee poll on Twitter and people respond to it. I don't get 1,000 hits, but I always get a few people responding to it. And over time, people are drawn to my feed who like coffee and also enjoy SEO or email marketing or something like that. So you end up making connections. So that's the soap opera sequence. And again, the whole goal is to not just walk up to someone and say, buy my stuff. It's to walk up to someone and say, hey, my name's Paul. It's nice to meet you. What's your name? What do you do? It's not all about you. It's about them too, and trying to figure some of that out. So, but in moving on with that, after you make a connection with your audience, then you really want to keep your audience's attention. And so how do you do that? And this is another style of email sequence that Russell Brunson talks about. I'm not sure where he got it from, but it's called the Seinfeld email sequence. And Seinfeld was the show in the 90s. Jerry Seinfeld's a comedian. He plays himself in the show. And the joke was it was a show about nothing. And so with the Seinfeld email sequence, it's really a list about nothing. Well, same as the show. It's not really about nothing, but that was the joke on the show, right? Jerry, the main character, and his friend George pitched an idea to an NBC exec about doing a show about nothing. But in reality, it was a show about his life, his day in and day out. Funny, entertaining, shocking. Seinfeld, and if you don't, you should check it out. It's a very funny show. But the point is that it's not like a show with a plot. As George joked with the NBC exec, there's no plot, there's no script. He goes, "What do you mean there's no script?" But that's what they're talking about. They're talking about, it's just I got up, I went to work, and I found this great coffee shop. I bumped into a friend. So what does he mean by all that? And in all seriousness, there is kind of a good point here, and the point is that. You're not talking really about nothing. You're talking about, your daily life. And that's exactly what the Seinfeld email sequence is. It's a daily email about you or your, as Russell calls it, your attractive character, as he puts it. And so in his .com Secrets book, he describes the email sequence as a chat about, your current day. And, it might include some of the following things. And he lists some of these things in his .com Secrets book. So, and again, these are just guidelines. They're just there to give you ideas of the types of things you can do. You could literally talk about anything as long as it met that criteria of engaging your audience and keeping them engaged, right? So a few ideas, what's going on in the attractive character's life. That's one that he had in his book. Another is, has anything embarrassing happened today? Talk about it, right? I mean, these are great emails. And the thing is, they're engaging. People love a good, what is the Don Henley song? I'm going to forget, of course. It's terrible. Everyone out there is saying the name, screaming the name as I can't think of it. But it's, Dirty Laundry, right? People love Dirty Laundry. People love soap opera type stuff, right? So, has anything embarrassing happened? Talk about it. If it's a holiday season, how are you coping? Are you stressed? Are you ecstatic? Are you a super holiday person? Do you hate the holidays? How do you get through it all? And, you just share your experiences. What are your vacation plans this year is another idea. Or here's one I love to use. Any recent purchases that you regret for whatever reason, or recent purchases that you absolutely are thrilled about. And then you talk about why. What made you angry with rage before that now you laugh about. And, as a parent, not everyone's a parent and not everyone's a pet owner, but as a parent or a pet owner or both, everyone has funny stories about their kids they can share, or funny stories about their pets, or annoying stories about their pets, and, or funny or dramatic events about things that happened in your past that teach a lesson. So you get the idea, right? These are just a bunch of examples he runs through. And this sequence is after you've gone through the soap opera sequence. So there is an order. Soap opera sequence, again, you're at a party talking to someone. You get to know them first before you start talking about, although I've literally seen Jerry Seinfeld do that at parties where he just starts talking about crazy stuff. But yeah, I mean, you want to do the soap opera sequence first, and then you want to send out a daily email called the Seinfeld email sequence that meets these criteria. Now, the joke has always been that it's about nothing, and I said earlier, maybe a list about nothing. But the reality is that these are just starter ideas to get you going. And you can talk about anything in your life, and they all seem to be, like I said, mostly about nothing, except you using them to engage your audience and lead them back to your products, services, and special offers or events if you have events. And that's important, right? People aren't just going to read a litany of emails that you send them every single day that talk about, hey, get 20% off this. Discounts, those kinds of things are, somewhat engaging, but they're not as engaging as an email that's dramatic or it's funny or it tells a real story. People love like I said, people love a good soap opera. They love dirty laundry. They love all that stuff. So I'm not saying you have to air your dirty laundry, but everyone has funny stories. Everyone has dramatic stories. Everyone has a story about the time they, blew a job interview or, got in an auto accident parking, like the other day, literally, this would be an email I could write. The other day I was shopping and I took the wrong shopping cart. And I got 3/4 of the way around the other side of the store, the grocery store, and I realized this isn't my shopping cart. So I took the cart all the way back to the produce aisle. Now this is from the other side of the store, all the way back to the produce aisle. And I looked and I said, how am I going to notice this person? I said, I know why. They're going to look lost. So I got back there and sure enough, there was a lady who looked so confused. She's looking. I rolled the cart up to her and says, I'm sorry. I think I accidentally took your cart. You are missing a cart, right? And she laughed. She says, I am missing a cart. How did I know? How did you know? I said, well, you look completely lost. And I said, your cart was right next to mine. I just grabbed it. I'm so sorry. I gave it to her. But stuff like that, right? Stuff like that works. People like to read. And, you'd have to figure out a subject line that would be engaging or, something that would be funny because people love to read stuff like that. Even if they don't buy your products or services necessarily, it's kind of a cool thing to have. So anyways, that is the Seinfeld daily email list, right? So just to recap where we are so far, using a subject line that's going to grab someone's attention. You're going to connect with your audience using a soap opera email sequence. Then you're going to subsequently keep your audience's attention with a Seinfeld email sequence. And then our fourth way to create an effective email campaign is consistency. And, again, the Seinfeld daily email sequence is certainly consistent as long as you do that. But, a word of warning, you don't want to start something like that, set expectations for someone, and then just stop. Oh, I went on vacation, so I'm not going to do that stuff. The heck with that, right? Well, you do that, and what happens is that someone gets used to your daily emails, they read them, and then after a while, they don't see you for a week, and they think, oh, the guy's gone, or oh, he doesn't do it anymore. Or worse yet, you wait a month. Now, statistically or speaking, I know that when I listened to some podcasts of other marketers, including guys like Russell Brunson, I know he talked, and it may have been, I don't know if it was a podcast or in his .com secrets book, but anyways, he talked about how, people really hate the idea of sending an email out every day. Like they're saying, oh, that's way too much. No one's going to like that. That's terrible. And what he did was he used to send one out monthly, and he said that it got, very blah engagement and very blah money because he sells products. He sells his services and products through that email. So when he changed it to twice a month, his revenue, his return on investment doubled. And then he kept increasing it until he finally said, you know what, this definitely is true. This daily stuff does work. And even my own experience, I had an email list with 300 plus people on it. I sent out a daily email for 30 days. It was a 30-day sequence on a product that I was working on. And, 1% of people unsubscribed. 99% of my list stayed on, even though they got an email from me every day. And they weren't, just to be clear too, they weren't all trying to sell something. I follow these principles. I try to send stuff that's, of value to people. If it's not funny, then it has to be valuable. If it's not dramatic, it has to be something that provides value or entertainment or engagement of some type to them, right? And so sending out links to YouTube videos. I have one guy, Franklin Hatchett. He's a guy I really like quite a bit as well. And he sends out YouTube videos, links to his videos and his emails all the time. And it's great value. His emails are not long at all. It's like maybe less than a minute. But he's got a link to his YouTube video on there. He's got great subject lines to catch your attention. And when you open it up, it also continues to keep your attention. So good stuff. So that's number 4. So a fifth way to create an effective email campaign is to use a reliable and powerful CRM. So CRM's customer relationship management, and generally that just it's sometimes misused, but it generally refers to the way that you're getting the information. Now I kind of use it in a very vague way here, so probably not as accurate as I should, but so I refer to things like get response, ClickFunnels, ActiveCampaign. They're all ways that you can get send out an email campaign and add people to your list, right? But you want something good. You want something reliable and something powerful. If you don't do that, or you don't have that, then you're not going to get, the last thing you want are errors where, the last people get into your email list and they only get 3 of your emails because the others aren't being sent because that product is blacklisted, or the email, if you're sending through something less reliable, like SendGrid is a great tool to use, but let's say you're sending something through Mailgun. Mailgun is not bad. I don't want to libel any product, but there's some tools that people use and they just end up in the spam folder. I know I work with a guy who uses Mailgun. He sends me stuff for his product and it doesn't always get to me. So he has to work a little bit harder. Again, that could have nothing to do with Mailgun, but it's just something. I guess my point is you really want to pay attention to that stuff. You want something that's powerful and hence the operative phrase reliable, right? So that's number 5. Number 6, the 6th way to create an effective email campaign is to make sure your content is engaging as possible. And we talked about this earlier a little bit with the soap opera and the Seinfeld email sequences. Serious, funny, shocking, all the above, right? But it has to be engaging. If you're like someone like, for instance, Franklin Hatchett, he'll put stuff out there that sometimes hits those touch points, but sometimes it's just, hey, here's pure 100% value for you. And if you're hitting the right audience and the people that have opted into your list are people that are really, for instance, in this case, interested in affiliate marketing or interested in marketing tools, or marketing tips, he knows that. And so he provides value, serious value through his YouTube videos. And but he can also be funny, and certainly Russell Brunson is. He's funny, as is Jim Edwards, his cohort in crime. They're very funny to watch them do Funnel Fridays together. So, I just enjoy it. I have a good time watching it. So there's a lot to be said about engaging, right? No doubt about it. So that's the 6th. The number 7 way to create an effective email campaign is to target a specific audience or niche. So why do I say this? I say this because if you're targeting the wrong audience, or it's a vague audience where you're just kind of trying to throw a wide net, then you're going to get, from those emails, you're going to get leads that aren't targeted or useful. So sometimes you can get engagement and sometimes you can get people opting to your list, but they may not have no interest in what you're doing at all. Maybe they just thought you were funny, right? So you have to it's a combination of things, right? You have to kind of make sure that not only is your content engaging as possible, but you're targeting the right audience. Number 8 of the 9 ways to create an effective email campaign is use a call to action in every email. So if you have a product or a service, you can have a call to action, something that drives subscribers to your other offers, services or products or upsells, right? So you can have a passive or an active call to action. And what I mean by that is, you should never send an email out that doesn't have a call to action. But let's say you're just sending something out that's value, just 100% value for your list, right? Your email subscribers. You could have a passive call to action at the bottom of the email in the form of a footer. Like you can have a nicely designed one like they do in ClickFunnels, where it's a big square that's kind of gray inside and it's got all their offers in it, right? And it's just there. They're not calling out to it. They're not pointing to it. They're not talking about it. That's a passive call to action, right? I do that a lot with nonprofits. You send out a message, and you see it all the time. Look at any number of the political emails you get, right? There's always donate today somewhere in the bottom. That's passive, right? But you can also have an active one, and that's where they're specifically called out in the email. So you might actually talk about a specific product and tell them, hey, act today, and you'll get this other value if you go through my email and use this code, that kind of stuff, right? So that's active. And you don't want every email to have an active call to action because people, again, you might get too much. But, having a passive footer in every email certainly works as well. A passive call to action in your footer, rather, works well. And the last of the 9 ways to create an effective email campaign, the last tip here is, that's so funny. I said the last tip and it's really providing value by giving tips or advice, right? So, again, kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier, but really just want to take a few seconds to emphasize it because you don't want to, and it's a theme that runs throughout all these tips, right? But you don't want to just ask someone for something, right? And you don't want to just throw your offers in front of someone all the time. That's just tiresome. People will just unsubscribe or they'll just ignore your messages, right? You want to do something of value to them. So for instance, like I said earlier, YouTube videos are a popular way to engage an email audience. Things where maybe you have links to blog posts or links to a podcast. If you're dropping a podcast like this one, you may want to just tell people, hey, go here and get onto my podcast for free. Those are important way. That is an important way also to create an effective email campaign because you want to provide that value. You want to give people tips and advice and things they like, and just to give a few examples, you could give tips on good tools to use. I do that in every show. This show we've already talked about, we did talk about a few tools. We talked about GetResponse, ClickFunnels, ActiveCampaign are examples, and but I also talked about some frameworks. We talked about different types of email sequences, and they're both present in the .com Secrets book. And I'll provide links to the .com Secrets book as well as the different tools. I have affiliate relationships with some of them, but not all of them, just to be upfront. But again, really talking about tools and providing that information to people and tips about those tools. That's really popular. I mean, just look at YouTube and just search on how to do something in GetResponse or ClickFunnels or ActiveCampaign, or even search on the soap opera email sequence. And there are tons of videos on these. And the reason for that is that they're popular. A lot of people want to know about this stuff. So providing details and information on this is definitely helpful. So, so that's our 9 ways to create an effective email campaign. And I just want to mention again that appreciate all your support, and those that are listening to the show always appreciate that. If you want to leave me a message, you go to anchor.fm/expressleads, and you can leave a message to me on the show. And if I get enough messages, I can talk about that in a separate podcast. And for those of you that are joining me week to week, in the next week or two, we're going to have an interview. I'm going to do my first interview on my podcast. I'm going to interview a gentleman who is also a marketer, and he works with a set of pretty unique tools that does some highly engaging social media, not even just management. I mean, it goes way beyond that. But I love tools, and if you listen to the show and you hear me talk about the tools and you like that stuff, you're gonna want to join me for that one as well. So, Paul Brady, again, your host, and thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you or not seeing you, but engaging with you on our next podcast. This has been Express Leads, hosted by Paul Brady of Brady Consulting and Inbound Marketing. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave us a voice message by visiting anchor.fm/expressleads. Thank you.